How's it going? My name's Jason and I love electronic music and I love talking about the gear that we use to make it. And today we have before us the Roland P-6. Now, I know I'm slightly late to the game here. This thing has been out for about a year and a half. It was released in September of 2024, but I decided to buy one of these, had a little bit of extra Christmas money, and I found one used nearby. And I gotta say, I'm glad I did. And you know what? The Roland P-6 is surprising. And what I want to talk about in this video is how it surprised me. And I'm going to talk about kind of 4 different areas. And within each of these areas, there's some positive surprises, but also some negative ones. So let's dive into that. And if that sounds good to you, please like and subscribe. Okay, let's get into the first surprise, and that is the flexibility of the P6. And the first thing that I found that surprised me both pleasantly and then also in a negative way was to do with the way that you can route the sound and the way it interacts with the effects. So let me get a pattern going here. So we'll start out programming in a kit. We're going to do just a nice 4 on the floor beat, something simple. There's some really cool effects options. I love bringing in chorus. Right now, the effects are impacting everything, right? The kick drum, the bass. And I mean, it sounds pretty good, but it really limits what's going on because you don't usually want the kick drum to be in the same chorus. And so at first I thought, that's a little bit disappointing because I don't want the effects to go on everything. Then I took a look at the manual quickly. I was pleasantly surprised that there is actual multiple routing options for your sounds. And so that means you don't have to put effects on everything. So what I can do is I can bring up the kick, and then I go to the mixer and I dial it to the out B, press enter. See, right now it's going through the effects. I just have to go bus A or bus B. You have a couple of mixing options, and there we go. The kick is no longer affected by the chorus. Same thing with the hi-hat. I believe now it's not affected. Yep, it'd be cool to call it up. Cool. So that goes for all the other effects. Like if you want to have it so that just some of them have that like cassette sound, but not all of them. Like see right there, we lost the hi-hat. We can bring it back. You know, or we kind of lost the bass. All right, kind of lost the chorus. Or sorry, kind of lost the clap. We can change it. So right now, then it's just the yeah sound. You know what I mean? So I really appreciated that, the opportunity to be able to route things to different spaces. Now, this one I said was both a positive surprise and a little bit of a negative surprise, because even though you can route things to the effects, this has been brought up in other videos, but I wanted to mention it here. I find it really disappointing that the delay and reverb are not part of the effects bus, but instead are separate. So you hear those kind of impacting the dry signal and not impacting the effect, right? That clap, the reverb is coming from the dry signal of the clap, not the post effects signal, and that's disappointing. So that's a positive surprise about the routing, but also a negative surprise about the reverb and delay routing. Okay, the second pleasant surprise that I had was that you're not limited to these 6 pads. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I think I had in mind the workflow of the Volca sample. So, as you know, if you've got this, it's simple, but you are limited to the parts. So you've got 1 to 10 parts, and you've got a sample memory. And then what you do in each part is using this sample, you select what sample is going to be loaded into those 10 parts. Once you've got your samples loaded in, that is your kit, so to speak. And so you're limited to just triggering from these 10 parts. But it works differently with the Roland P-6. Now, I approached it thinking that basically it was the same. So I thought, okay, that means you basically choose what you want for pad 1, choose what you want for pad 2, 3, up to 6. And so then you're limited to that. So essentially I thought that meant you only have 6 parts. But the pleasant surprise was that actually you've got far beyond that. You can be triggering things from A1 through 6, and then you could be triggering things from B, 1 through 6, and so on with all of these letters. So let me show you what that means. Right. So I've got A is being fully utilized 1 to 6. And I thought, okay, that's cool, but feels limited compared to the Volca sample. Now, this might be obvious to you, but I had to figure it out for myself. You can go now beyond this and start triggering things from the other banks. So if I wanted some different bass lines going, that's what's in my C. Right? I can start triggering all of these. So let's get some different bass things going on. And let's get a different one. Right, so I got 3 going there. Almost all 6 of these are being triggered now. And you can keep going until basically it tells you to stop. So I thought that was pretty cool. You've got a lot more layers to work with. In fact, a lot more parts, a lot more banks, a lot more flexibility. Now, the negative side to that was because of this layout with these different banks and these different pads, I find that it can get confusing. It's very easy to forget where your sounds are being triggered from when you start bringing in multiple banks. Okay, the second surprise, this one has to do with what's available on each of the pads themselves. When you get it loaded with samples in the factory settings, it looks like you're only getting 1 sample per pad because there's, on 1, there's a kick drum, on 2, there's a hi-hat, that sort of thing. I can't remember exactly what they were because I've changed it out. But I'm thankful to Forever Procrastinating in his channel because he's shown how you can get more than 1 sample on each pad. And basically, you are using the chop functionality. He's got a whole tutorial on how you can do that, even with a template. Essentially, what you're doing is you are creating like a sample file or an audio file with multiple types of samples and then importing them in and then using the chop function to split them up into different sections and so that you can play them on different notes on the keyboard. So what you could do is you could have potentially like 8 kick drums, depending on how, what you put the sample rate to on 1. You could have like 8 snare drums on 2, 8 hi-hats on 3. And so that's what I've done with my A bank so that I can give myself a lot more to work with. And it's all within that A bank. So it's a lot more easy for me to remember what's going on. So I thought that was really cool. You're getting a lot more out of each pad. And so go over to Forever Procrastinating to see how you can use that using the chop function. Now, what I want to say is a little bit disappointing about this surprise is that when you bring these samples in and you've kind of got, your 6 kicks, your 6 hi-hats, all of that, I think you're going to find that that chop function doesn't always work really well. Like the first kick drum lined up really well, but then the second kick drum actually has a little bit of a delay to it, so it's actually starting kind of slightly off. So it's not going to be right on the grid, and the way that it works with the chop functions is when you change the start, it's going to change the starting point of of all the samples uniformly. So you're not able to go in there and edit what's happened with the chop. So the chop is kind of cool as long as it works, but when it doesn't work, you're kind of at its mercy. So what I found was actually potentially a better way to bring in multiple samples in each pads was to utilize the input settings for sampling, because in those settings you can actually tell it how many chopped samples you want in each of those, and then it allows you to record them separately for each one. So let's see if I can show you how I did that. So what I've done is I've connected the Roland TR-8 into the mix in. Now, you can also do this from your DAW, just have an output from your audio interface into the mix in. But for the sake of this video, it's a lot easier for me to show you it on the Roland TR-8. And I'm just going to be using this one that's in view here, the kick drum. So essentially what I'll be able to do is through the sampling functions coming in, I'll be able to record each of the kick drums and have them in one pad. So what you do is you're going to want to go to an empty pad, and I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. So it's an empty pad, and I've got my kick drum set up, and I found that the best setting was to have this at, a sensitive of enough starting point so that it's going to trigger properly. If you have like -3, it has to be a really loud input in order for it to trigger. So I've got it so it's set to something pretty sensitive. And then what you do is, I'm just going to limit us to 4 so you get the idea. But when you press shift and pitch, this is telling you how many samples you want in that pad. Okay, so we're in the sample setting, shift pitch, and that is telling us, so we're going to have 4 samples in that pad, and that's kind of enabling the chop functionality. And then now using this, you want to go into, depending on what length your sample is, we just need a quarter note. So when you have it the 1/4, that stands for a quarter note. And so each time we trigger this and sample it, it's going to be a quarter note long, up to 4 in that bank. Now we're ready to record. And now essentially what we're going to do, I like this because this is showing us which banks are available. And so we're going to press sample that pad. It's telling us that we're now going to be recording the first of 4 chops within that. And so when I press sample again, it's on standby. And when I play this kick drum, it's going to record it, and it's only going to be a quarter note in length automatically. So here we go. There we go. See, it recorded it and paused, and now it's waiting for number 2. So what I go into here, bring up my 909 sample, and I press this again. It's on standby. I press kick drum, and there we go. We've got the second one. Now it's waiting for the third. So I'm going to bring up the next option here, and I want to go into this orange one. I forget whether that's the 606 or the 707. I'm pretty sure it's the 606, and I love the sound of this kick drum. So we've got that set up. We got Instaplay, standby. Here we go. There we go. That's the 4th. And now we've got one more for good measure. We'll bring in this kind of 8080 noise kick drum that it's got on the white pad, and press it again. Instaplay, kick drum. There we go. So it's recorded 4 samples in. The reason why I like this better than importing it from the computer is that you know that it's coming in exactly at the right time. You're not going to have to fiddle. You're not trying to figure out, oh, was it too big? And all of that, because you know what, that's another kind of negative surprise. I don't really love the import software that it gives us. Yes, you kind of get some functionality within it, but it's a bit of a rigmarole to get it set up and then test out what you've done and all that sort of thing. But okay, so now we've got our pad here, and you can see the samples are laid out across the keyboard. So now when I press it, there's the 808, there's the 909, there's the 606, and there's that last one. Tell me in the comments what it is. I forgot to check the manual to see what it is. So there you go. I find that to be a really cool surprise that you can bring in multiple samples, storing them in that pad. And you could go beyond this. Basically, the more you lower your settings of the sampling using the lo-fi, so the lower that is, and then if you make it into a mono signal, you could have a ton of samples in that pad. Go ahead and try it out and let me know how many you fit in there. I mean, it gives you up to 64 in this. So I guess potentially, if they're small enough, then you could get 64 samples in one bank. Okay, now let me take you into the last surprise here. And this one has to do with the granular setup. Now, again, this is positive and negative, but overall positive. This has a granular synthesis engine or granular sampler. And this is my first time kind of really diving into that because of this feature. So essentially, if I can do it justice here, what it's doing is it's allowing you to choose little snippets of your sample and then play them back in certain ways and with certain amounts going on in each of those for really interesting sounds. And each of those snippets are called grains, and it allows you to adjust the kind of the size of those grains, the amount of them that are played back at once, and then how they're played back, whether it's forward and reverse, different speeds. And also, once you have those, you can play them across the keyboard so that they're higher or lower. You can create a lot of different things here, from pads to shots to even percussive sounds, depending on what your source material is. Now, the surprise here isn't just the fact that you've got granular synthesis. The surprise that I really thought was cool was the MIDI functionality of that. If you look in the manual, it gives you an extensive range of MIDI commands that you can use an external controller for, so that you can kind of tweak as you go. Because I mean, the negative surprise with the granular is that there's a lot of menu diving in order to tweak the sound. And it can be really confusing. As we know, everyone is complaining about this screen and how it looks. You're trying to figure out what those characters are. And so on top of that, granular is pretty complicated to begin with. So if you're menu diving and you don't really have many visual cues, it can be really hard to understand what is going on. So the way around this, I found, was the fact that they give you a ton of different options in terms of the MIDI controller options. So here's a view of what they are. You can see you've got lots of different options here, from the amount of grains, the size of the grains, even into the reverb, the delay, the filter, the resonance. So if you've got a MIDI controller like I've got here, you can map those out so that you can be tweaking them on the fly. Now, here's a picture of how I've got it set up. And so as you can see, the first knob is going to be the speed of the playback. The second one is jitter. And now for each of these, dig into the manual. It's going to tell you what they do. I'm going to try my best to do it from memory. The jitter is going to control kind of the randomness of the playback and what points it's playing back. The grain size is how big that snippet is of the sample. The grain number is a really cool option. It's going to kind of control the burst of the playback. So the higher the number, the more grains that are going to be played over top of each other. And it creates a really cool effect, as you're going to see in a moment. The spread is the range of the sample that's being played back in terms of where it's selecting the grains from. And then as you can see, I've got cutoff, resonance for the cutoff, and filter EG. And I've got the ADSR of the voice so that I can control kind of that amplitude ADSR. And as you know, the filter EG is linked to that as well, unless you go into the settings. So as you can see, I've kind of got a cool amount of functionality here set out for the granular. So let's load up our sound. And in order to do that, the shortcut is to press pattern, granular, and then the pad that you want. So there we go. So now it is controlling, the granular is controlling that. And now what I want to do is kind of make sure everything is like reset. So the start point is happening at 0. The end point, that's actually this one here. So it's the size of the grains. So it's at its biggest. See, so it's actually playing back the whole sample now. So right now it's acting as a sample playback, and you can do that at different points in the keyboard. And I've got this routed to the reverb nicely. Got to make sure I've got a filter going. So right now, and then here's the filter envelope. So you can be controlling a little bit of return again with the keyboard. So, like I said, right now it's not doing but anything crazy to it. But now that's where you can start to play around with what's happening. So your friend here, in terms of visualization, is also go to voice. And it's showing you kind of what's happening. So right now it's playing back the whole thing. But now when I start to decrease the size, you can see it's just playing back a smaller portion. And it's even kind of looping it. Right. Now you've got a whole different sound going on. If we get the keyboard. So you can start to see the difference. And then now also we can combine that with the burst. Turn on the resonance. So it's repeating. I wish you could turn on polyphony with this, so it's just kind of a mono granular, but still really cool. Get some reverb. Now, that's with kind of playing around with the grain size and the endpoint the grain size and the amount that's happening. And you can also get into a jitter, which is going to kind of change where it's playing back from, and also the speed. So kind of how quickly it's playing back kind of within the section. And then you can also change the spread, which is going to change kind of where or how big the whole section is that it's drawing those grains from in terms of the sample. So let's get our handy kind of voice screen going on here. So you can see right now, that's how big the grain is. If we make the grain bigger. Now speed kind of works with jitter. And spread. See, it's playing back and taking different sections because of this jitter. This kind of randomizes it even more. And now the more we close this off, kind of the more it's going to be doing that. We increase the amount that are happening. And this is forward playback. And now when you change the speed that way, it's doing reverse. It's taking it from the starting playback point and going into the reverse of it and jittering around within that. So you hear now you've got a whole different sound. And so, this is how you can play around with glitch effects within the Granular. And then, now you can be playing. That's going to make it sound even more glitchy. So, pleasant surprise, the MIDI functionality here, the options that they give you for the Granular, and using a MIDI controller, it can really help you start to get your head around what it's capable of, and then also to be able to manipulate it in a way that's a lot more fun than trying to do all the menu diving. All right, so if you've been watching up to this point, thank you. I want to give you a bonus. This is a bonus surprise. I am so happy with how these two go together. That's been the surprise hit here. I've got the Roland P-6 going into the Roland TR-8, and the two together are such a good combination, especially because of this sidechain feature. So let me show you what I mean. Let's get a pattern going. I've got a little bit of a thing going on here. Now this is where this comes in. So you get it going together. Now let me get this kick drum out of the way. The filter. High pass. There we go. Now the two are layering nicely. Bring in a snare. Let's see what's happening. So here's the thing, not only do these sound great together, we got the classic Roland sounds, and then we've also got whatever sounds we want in here, but when you bring in the sidechain, it really starts to make it come to life as a song. You see what I mean? There's a lot of opportunity here to jam, to create ideas. I love it. Yeah, so there you see what I mean. Surprise. This works so well with the TR-8, really comes together nicely. And I imagine whatever drum machine you might have, pair it up with this. It is a ton of fun. These two things, you can create pretty much whole sketches of songs and jam it out. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to show you. Those are the main surprises that I found with the Roland P-6. Thank you so much for watching. I've had a lot of fun exploring this with you. If you want to see me check anything more out on the P-6, write it in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time then, take care. Bye.